Okay, so good morning, Sir Klemens and friends. Today we are going to present about Chapter 9, Regional Economic Integration. Our group consists of me, Ella, Felice, Latifa, and Ivan. Next slide, please. So for the opening case of this chapter is about renegotiating NAFTA. So since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, he often repeatedly criticized the North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA) as an unfair deal in which Americans had taken to the cleaners by Mexico. NAFTA itself is a trade agreement between three countries, America, Canada, and Mexico. Canada here has been spared from attacks by Trump, probably because trade between the two countries is relatively balanced. While Mexico, on the other hand, in 2015, U.S. producer exported $34 billion of finished automobiles and automotive parts to Mexico, but imported $106 billion in autos and parts from Mexico. Without that $72 billion trade deficit in autos and auto parts with Mexico. The Trump administration is looking at different options for restructuring trade with Mexico. These include placing tariff on import of autos from Mexico. One thing is certain, if the Trump administration does place tariff on import from Mexico, the cost will be borne in part by American auto producers who will have to pay more for auto parts and in part by American consumers who probably end up paying more for their automobiles. There is also the possibility that Mexico will respond by placing its own retaliatory tariff on U.S. import, which will probably result in U.S. job losses. Next slide, please. So after understanding the opening case, the introduction itself for this chapter explores the economic and political debate surrounding regional economic integration, paying particular attention to the economic and political benefit and cost of integration, reviews progress toward regional economic integration around the world, and maps the important implication of regional economic integration for the practice of international business. Here, we will discuss current developments that are threatening the future of the EU and NAFTA. Before tackling this objective, we first need to examine the levels of integration that are theoretically possible. Next slide, please. The first one, we have levels of economic integration. So as been seen in the diagram, the middle part is in a free trade area. All barriers to the trade of goods and services among members countries are removed. In a theoretically idea free trade area, no discriminatory tariff, quota, subsidies, or administrative impediments are allowed to distort trade between members. The second one is the custom union eliminates trade barriers between members countries and adopt a common external trade policy. Establishment of a common external trade policy necessitates significant administrative machinery to oversee trade relations with non-members. And then the third one, we have the next level of economic integration. A common market has no barriers to trade among members countries, includes a common external trade policy, and allows factors of production to move freely among members. The fourth one, common market. An economic union involves the free flow of products and factors of production among members countries and the adoption of a common external trade policy. But it also requires a common currency, harmonization of members' tax rates, and a common monetary and fiscal policy. And then for the last one, towards economic union raises the issue of how to make a coordinating bureaucracy accountable to the citizen of member nation. The answer is through political union in which a central position apparatus coordinates the economic, social, and foreign policy of the member states. Next slide, please. Next, for the next topic, we have the case for regional integration. The case for regional integration itself is both economic and political, and it is typically not accepted by many groups within a country, which explain why most attempts to achieve regional economic integration have been continuously halting. In this section, we examine the economic and political case for integration and two impediments to integration and discuss in the later page. Next slide, please. The economic case for integration. So in chapter 8, we studied about how foreign direct investment FDI can transfer technology, marketing, and managerial know-how to host nation. Because many governments have accepted part or all of the case for intervention and unrestricted free trade and FDI have proved to be only an ideal. Against this background, regional economic integration can be seen as an attempt to achieve additional gains from the free flow of trade and investment between countries, and beyond that, attainable under global agreements such as WTO. The greater the number of countries involved, the more perspective that must be reconciled, and the harder it will be to reach the agreement. Thus, attempts at regional economic integration are motivated by a desire to exploit the gains from free trade and investment. Next slide, please. Next, the political for integration. Linking neighboring economies and making them increasingly dependent on each other creates incentive for political cooperation within the neighboring states and reduce the potential for violent conflict. In addition to this, by grouping their economies, the countries can enhance their political weight in the world. The establishment of NAFTA also had a political aspect to it. In fact, many NAFTA supporters felt that trade agreement would help promote democracy and economic growth in Mexico. This, they argue, would be good for the United States since it would reduce flow of illegal immigration from Mexico. In fact, illegal immigration from Mexico rose from 2.9 million in 1995 to almost 7 million in 2007. However, since the strong Mexican economy has indeed led to a reduction in illegal immigration from Mexico, and by 2015, the number of Mexican illegal immigrants had fallen to 5.8 million. Next slide, please. Next, impediments to integration. So the reason for this, there is two. The first one, although economic integration aids the majority, it has its costs. While a nation as a whole may benefit significantly from a regional free trade agreement, certain groups will lose at least in the short to medium term. Moving to a free trade regime can involve painful adjustment. Due to the establishment of NAFTA, some Canadian and U.S. workers in such industry as textiles, which employ low-cost, low-skilled labor, lost their jobs as Canadian and U.S. firms move production to Mexico. The second one is impediments to integration arise from concerns over national sovereignty. For example, here, Mexico concerns about maintaining control of its oil interests resulted in an agreement with Canada and the United States to extend the Mexican oil industry from any liberalization of foreign investment regulations achieved under NAFTA. Concern about national sovereignty arise because close economic integration demands the country give up some degree of control over such key issues as monetary policy, fiscal policy, and trade policy. Next slide, please. Next, we have the case against regional integration. Trade creation occurs when high-cost domestic producers are replaced by low-cost producers within the free trade area. It may also occur when higher-cost external producers are replaced by lower-cost external producers within the free trade area. Trade diversion occurs when lower-cost external suppliers are replaced by higher-cost suppliers within the free trade area. A regional free trade agreement will benefit the world only if the amount of trade it creates exceeds the amount it diverts. Next slide is going to be explained by my friend.
Okay, so the next one is enlargement of the European Union. So by the end of the 1990s, 13 countries had applied to become European Union members. It had been discussed since the collapse of the communism at the end of 1980s, and in December 2002, EU formally agreed to accept 10 countries, including Baltic countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland. Their inclusion in the European Union expanded the Union to 25 states, added 23% to the landmass, 75 million new citizens, building population of 450 million, and created a single continental economy with a GDP of close to 11 euro trillion. So in order to join European Union membership, the applicants had to privatize state assets, deregulate markets, restructure industries, and tame inflation. They also need to shrine complex the union laws into their own system, establish stable democratic governments, and respect human rights. The new members were not able to adopt the euro for several years, and free movement of labor among the new and existing members was prohibited until then. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next one is for Brexit. So Brexit stands for the British exit from the European Union, while the British on June 23, 2016, the British electorate voted in a national referendum to leave the European Union. In early 2017, the British government formally notified the Union of its intention to exit the Union. While the British have enjoyed the benefit of free trade within Europe, a segment of population has never been comfortable with the loss of national sovereignty implied by membership within the Union. And then the British have often railed against regulation imposed by the European Union bureaucracy in Brussels. Immigration have become a key issue to this. Many people immigrate from Eastern Europe. Most of them have been low skilled and work in a restaurant, hotel, or retail stores. So leaving the union means it will allow British to take control of immigration. The impending exit of Britain creates an existential problem for the Union. So, because the Britain is the second largest national economy of European Union, and then the second one is because of the aftermath of the British vote. Right-wing politicians in Holland, Denmark, and France also called for referendums on continuing the membership, raising fears that the British vote might trigger the other countries to exit as well. Next slide, please. Next one is regional economic integration in the US. So it's similar to the regional economic of Europe. Like in Europe, we have European Union, and then in USA, there's also regional economic integration. So the most significant attempt is the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, and several other trade blocs are in the offing in the Americas, the most significant of which appear to be the Andean Community and Mercosur. Okay. For NAFTA, it includes U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and for you can see on the map. And then for the green one is Mercosur, which includes Venezuela, Brazil, and Argentina. And then for the Andean community, it consists of Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Next slide, please. Followed in 1991, the talks between U.S., Canada, and Mexico aimed at establishing NAFTA for them. The governments of the U.S. and Canada in 1988 agreed to enter into a free trade agreement to eliminate all tariffs and bilateral trade. So Mexico kind of like came later on after both U.S. and Canada established the agreement. Not what's included in NAFTA's contents. The first one is the abolition by 2004 of tariffs on 99% of the goods traded, and then removal of costs of most barriers on the cross-border flows of services, allowing financial institutions, for example, unrestricted access to Mexican market by 2000, protection of intellectual property rights, removal of most restriction on foreign direct investment among the 3 member countries, and then application of national environmental standards, provided such standards have a scientific basis. Lowering of standards to lure investment is described as being inappropriate. And then the last one is establishment of 2 commissions with the power to impose fines and remove trade privileges when environmental standards or legislation involving health and safety, minimum wages, or child labor are ignored. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the case for NAFTA. So proponents have argued that the free trade area should be viewed as an opportunity to create an enlarged and more efficient productive base for the entire region. For example, US and Canada would move production to Mexico to take advantage of the lower labor costs. Mexico would benefit from inward investment and employment, and the increased incomes would allow US and Canada to import more goods to Mexico. Okay, and this allow them to better compete with Asians and European rivals. And then the next one is the case against NAFTA. So those who oppose NAFTA claim that ratification would be followed by a mass exodus of jobs from the US and Canada into Mexico as employers sought to profit from Mexico's lower wage and less strict environmental and labor laws. Okay, and then the result is a study of the welfare effects of NAFTA, which take into account its impact on national income, suggests that Mexico and the United States saw small welfare gains of 1.31% and 0.08% respectively, while Canada suffered a welfare cost of 0.06%. Next slide, please. Okay, and then the evolution of the European Union. So the European Union is the product of 2 political factors. The first one is the devastation of Western Europe during 2 world wars and the desire for a lasting peace. And the second one is the European nations' desire to hold their own on the world's political and economic stage. In addition, many Europeans were aware of the potential closer economic integration of the countries. Okay. Next slide, please. Next one would be presented by my friend.
Okay, so here's the map that illustrates the expansion of the European Union through various enlargement over the years. So as you can see from here, this is the member states of the European Union in 2016. And for the yellow colored one is members of the European Union. And for the green one is non-members of the European Union. And the last one is like orange color is the applicants of the European Union. Okay, so this is the map, and this map also highlights the regions from which new members join, including Eastern European countries as well as smaller Mediterranean nations like Malta and Cyprus. Additionally, it mentions that the expected decrease in membership to 27 following Britain's exit from the EU in 2019. Next slide, please. So this is the political structure of the European Union. So there are four. The first one is the European Commission proposes EU or European Union legislation, implements it, and monitors compliance with EU laws by member states. It consists of commissioners appointed by member countries with a president chosen by member states. The Commission holds a monopoly in proposing EU legislation and enforces competition policy, ensuring fair market competition. The second one is the Council of European Union represents member states' interests and must agree on draft legislation for it to become EU law. It consists of representatives from member state governments with varying membership depending on the topic being discussed. The third one is the European Parliament, directly elected by member state population, debates legislation proposed by the Commission and forwarded by the Council. While primarily consultative, it can propose amendments and has gained increased power over time, including the right to vote on commissioner appointments and veto certain laws. And the last one is the Court of Justice serves as the Supreme Appeals Court for EU law, comprised of one judge from each country. It can ensure compliance with EU treaties and resolves disputes between member countries, companies, institutions, and the Commission or Council. Next slide, please. So here are the objectives of the act from the previous slide. So the first one is remove all frontier controls among EC countries, thereby abolishing delays and reducing the resources required for complying with trade bureaucracy. Second one is apply the principle of mutual recognition to product standards. A standard developed in one EC country should be accepted in another, provided if met basic requirements in such matters as health and safety. The third one is institute open public procurement to non-national suppliers, reducing costs directly by allowing lower cost suppliers into national economies and indirectly by forcing national suppliers to compete. Then lift barriers to competition in the retail banking and insurance businesses, which should drive down the cost of financial services, including borrowing through the EC. Then remove all restrictions on foreign exchange transactions between member countries by the end of 1992. Then the last one is abolish restrictions on cabotage, the right of foreign truckers to pick up and deliver goods with another member state's borders by the end of 1992. Estimates suggested this will reduce the cost of haulage within the EC by 10 to 15%. Next slide, please. So this is the impact. So the impact from that is the single European expert significant restructuring within European industry. with many firms transitioning to pan-European production and distribution systems to capitalize on scale economies and enhance competitiveness in a unified market. This led to a faster economic growth, with empirical studies suggesting a GDP increase of 2 to 5% in the first 15 years. However, 25 years later, the EU still faces challenges in fully realizing the single market due to lingering legal, cultural, and language differences among member nations, resulting in uneven implementation. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are the benefits of the euro. So as you can see here, the first one is it was believed that using one currency instead of many would lead to significant cost savings for businesses and individuals, mainly through reduced foreign exchange and hedging expenses amounting to 0.5% of the EU's GDP. The second one is a common currency facilitates price comparison across Europe, fostering competition as customers can easily shop around for better deals. This has led to lower prices and increased customer gains, prompting European producers to improve efficiency to maintain profitability. Thirdly, the common currency has spurred long-term gains in economic efficiency by intensifying competition among European companies. Fourthly, it has stimulated the development of a pan-European capital market, lowering the cost of capital and improving investment allocation efficiency, particularly benefiting smaller companies. Lastly, the euro-dominated capital market has expanded investment options for individuals and institutions, enabling better risk diversification and further reducing the costs of capital while enhancing capital resource allocation efficiency. Next slide, please. This is the cost of the euro. So countries like Great Britain, Denmark, and Sweden chose to remain outside the eurozone due to suspicions about the ECB's ability to maintain independence and control inflation. So here I have the first one is the establishment of a single currency in the EU led to concerns regarding the loss of national control over monetary policy, prompting the creation of the Independent European Central Bank, or ECB for short, under the Maastricht Treaty, modeled after the German Bundesbank. The ECB is tasked with managing monetary policy to ensure price stability, with its independence safeguarded by an executive board and governing council. Critics argue that the eurozone lacks the characteristic of an optimal currency area, as a member of the economies are highly dissimilar in terms of wage rates, tax regimes, and business cycles. This makes it challenging to implement a common monetary policy that suits all member states, potentially leading to adverse effects on different regions. And the last one is addressing the divergent effects within the eurozone may require fiscal transfer from prosperous to depressed regions, but this approach faces political obstacles due to resistance from taxpayers in wealthy regions who may oppose subsidizing less prosperous areas. And the next slide will be presented by my friend.
Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about the Andean community. Felice has already delved into this a little bit, but we are going to talk about it in more detail. So the Andean community was formed initially in 1969. It was formed by Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. They aimed for economic integration similar to the EU or European Union. So this included free trade among the members, a common external tariff, such as what it means is it's a uniform tax on imports from outside of the bloc, and coordinated policies on transportation, industry, and development. Special support was planned for the smaller economies, such as Bolivia and also Ecuador. However, there were challenges and it collapsed by mid-1980s. So it largely failed because there was no free trade, no common tariff, and no economic policy alignment. The reasons for its failure included political and economic instability in member countries, such as low growth, inflation, debt, etc. And there's also dominant socialist ideologies in many countries in the Andean community, clashing with the free market principles of the pact, because there's a difference in uh, ways of doing economy and also spreading economy for most of the people or something. So it was revived and the goals were renewed in late 1980s. So many Latin American countries adopted the free market policies. In 1990, the Andean Pact was relaunched as the Andean Community. So the new goals included the free trade area by 1992, which was achieved, the customs unions by 1994, which was achieved with some exceptions, and also there were common market by 1995. Unfortunately, this one was not achieved. So the current status now is that the Andean community currently operates as a customs union with some internal free trade, but not a fully integrated market. Negotiations to expand free trade with another South American bloc, or Mercosur, which we're going to talk about later, is pretty slow. And Venezuela unfortunately withdrew from the Andean community in 2006. Next is about the Mercosur. So Mercosur is a South American trade bloc founded in 1988 by Brazil and Argentina, and it enjoyed early success with free trade boosting their trade by 80%. So it made tariff reductions, which led to 80% increase in trade in between Brazil and Argentina. And then Paraguay and Uruguay joined in 1990, followed by Venezuela in 2012, which was later suspended in 2016 for political reasons. And its initial goal was to get full free trade area by 1994 and common market later. So progress seemed positive initially. So trade among members quadrupled between 1990 and 1998. And there was combined member GDP, which grew 3.5% annually from 1990 to 1996, which exceeds the 1980s performance. However, there were some criticisms and challenges in 1998 to 2001. So, for example, an economist argued that Mercosur diverted trade instead of creating it. So he pointed out to the inefficient industries within Mercosur, protected by high tariffs up to 70% on cars, for example, and this might hurt their competitiveness in the long run with external barriers when external barriers does come down. And the bloc faced a recession in 1998 with declining internal trade. And then Brazil's financial crisis in 1999 further weakened trade as other members' goods became expensive in Brazil. And Argentina's economic struggles in 2001 and even until now led them to propose a temporary suspension of the customs union to manage imports. Brazil agreed to this, and it effectively halted the progress towards a full custom union. So there is a revival attempt for this, and the progress is stalled for now from 2003 to now. So in 2003, the Brazilian president proposed a revitalized Mercosur modeled after the EU again. It's also modeled after the EU. So they envisioned a large membership, common currency, and a parliament. And however, since then, even if they were agreed to simplify the tariffs, Mercosur have made little progress towards a full customs union. Next, we have ASEAN, which is what Indonesia part of. We can see here we have Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and also Philippines. There's also plans for Timor-Leste to join recently. So it is a group with 600 million plus people and combined economic power of $2 trillion US in GDP. ASEAN aims for freer trade between member countries and also cooperation on industrial policies. So the challenges and the progresses include, so initially the progress was slow when it comes to reducing tariff within the ASEAN. Only 5% of the internal trade benefited from reduced tariffs before 2003, and the formation of the ASEAN Free Trade Area, or AFTA, in 2003 aimed to change that. So AFTA aims for tariff reductions on manufactured goods and agricultural products, ideally down to 5%. So the progress have been mixed. So there is a success that tariff on many goods have been reduced, but the challenge is that some countries like Malaysia protect domestic industries with higher tariffs, for example, with their automobile industry. And also certain products like rice have slower tariff reduction schedules. So for the expansions and the future, they are still moving towards a free trade zone. Newer members have joined the AFTA, so it's including Vietnam and Cambodia. The goal is to gradually reduce the tariffs to zero, with some exceptions on vital products such as rice. And ASEAN has now a free trade agreement with China, eliminating tariffs on 90% of traded goods. And this agreement is expected to further boost trade between China and ASEAN. Next, we have the other blocks in other regions. So we have Central American Common Market, which included the US and 11 other Pacific Rim countries, which included Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and even Chile. It collapsed in 1969 when war broke out between Honduras and El Salvador, and then it culminated a 2004 agreement. It's called Central America Free Trade Agreement, or CAFTA. And then there's also CARICOM, which is about US and 11 other Pacific countries again. I'm sorry, this one is supposed to be for about the Caribbean community. It was established in 1973, but since it failed to progress towards economic integration, it was transformed into Caribbean Single Market and Economy, or CSME, which expanded to 15 members by 2005. And this one, CSME, modeled on the EU single market, which goals is to lower trade barriers and harmonize macroeconomics and monetary policy between the member states. Next, we have regional trade blocs in Africa. So there are now 17 on the continent, with many countries belonging to multiple groups, yet progress towards actual free trade has been sluggish. Many blocs are inactive, and political instability in several countries keeps hindering real advancement. Big challenge is the fear of free trade and not able to compete without protection from tariffs, which makes it difficult to create true free trade zones or custom unions. So first we had EAC, which originally formed in 1967, but it collapsed in 1977. In 2001, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania committed to relaunching the EAC. Their goals included establishing a customs union with no tariffs within EAC countries, and they also wanted to create a regional court and legislative assembly. The challenge and progress has been slow, but it has happened. So there is a wider African free trade movement, such as in 2015, there was TFTA. It aimed to link 3 existing regional trade blocs in Africa, and it would then create a massive market with over 630 million people and a combined economic power of 1.2 trillion US dollars. And then there's also extra trade agreements that are not fully delved into in the book. We have Trans-Pacific Partnerships, or TPP, and we also have Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnerships, or TTIP. So these are actually the ones that are correct. So Trans-Pacific Partnership includes the US, Australia, and even Japan. And for this one, TTIP, it was basically the US with European Union. Right, so now basically we're just going to talk about the managerial implications of regional economic integration threats. So currently, the most significant developments in regional economic integration are occurring in the EU and also in NAFTA. Although some of the Latin American trade blocs and ASEAN may have economic significance in the future, developments in the EU and NAFTA currently have more profound implications for business practice. There are opportunities and threats on this. The first one is larger markets, as I've mentioned before, combined markets and so on. There are lower costs and also there are better economies of scale for production. But the threats included increased competitions, stronger competitions, trade fortresses, regulations, and also political instability. Because such as in countries where it's unstable, such as in African countries. That is all from our group. Thank you so much for watching.